Hey there, everyone. This is Anthony and Chad. We are proud LGBTQ entrepreneurs in Austin, Texas.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, I'm super excited to introduce you all to Anthony Sabotic and Chad Palmatier, who are calling us all the way from Austin, Texas. So welcome to the show, y'all. Are you ready to inspire Out Bosses?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, I'm super excited. I think we're going to learn a lot from y'all. And so for folks who aren't familiar, Anthony and Chad are co-founders of Lick Honest Ice Creams. They opened their business in the fall of 2011 because they wanted to offer honest ice creams to savvy palates in Austin. They use the word honest in their business name because they want to communicate that they use the purest ingredients in their artisanal ice creams. Since 2011, Lick Honest Ice Creams has been crafting artisanal ice creams with peak season ingredients, sourced responsibly from local farmers and food partners. They've come a long way since their first creamery in Austin. Today, they've expanded to San Antonio, a food truck, and their products are available nationally with the online marketplace Goldbelly. So for folks in the United States, yes, and for everyone else who tunes into the show, I'm sorry, but hopefully we'll learn how you all are expanding globally, right? So again, Chad, Anthony, welcome to the show. Why don't you kick us off and just tell us a little bit more about Lick Honest Ice Creams and what it means to deliver honest ice creams to savvy palates?
Sure. We'd be happy to.
You want to go first, Chad?
Sure. So thanks for having us today.
Yeah.
We're excited to chat with you.
Thanks for being here.
And your audience. No, so Anthony and I met back in 2005 while we were living in New York.
Way back.
I'm going way back. It's a long story. So we met in New York and just, we were both from small towns. He's from a town here outside of Austin in Texas, and I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So we both are, country boys, and we met in New York and just kind of connected immediately. Really quickly, actually. We just realized that we had a lot in common. We had very similar values and just, very similar upbringings and just a lot in common. And, I'll keep this short because it's kind of a long story. I could go on for days.
Like, are we getting to the ice cream?
But we just, being New York is very close to Lancaster, so we spent quite a bit of time with my family in Lancaster. It was a quick ride on the train. And while we were there, we ate a lot. There's a lot of great food there. And we ate a lot of ice cream. We both grew up making ice cream with our families, homemade ice cream. And it was just something that we both love to eat. So going to Lancaster, we ate a lot of it. There's a lot of small town creameries. There's local dairies, local producers. Everything is local pretty much right there. And it's all seasonal and delicious. And we were eating a lot of ice creams that were made with all of that in mind, from milk and cream from local dairies. Sometimes the ice cream was made at the dairy, but it was all seasonal and it was all family owned and
Very fresh.
Very fresh. So we started coming to Texas years, into this relationship, and there was nothing like that here. It's very strange.
And Chad's family, not to cut you off, Chad, but
it never happened.
Chad's family thought that it was so funny that I was obsessed with the ice cream in Lancaster. Just the fact that the creamery was attached to the dairy, and I kept telling them, I'm like, we don't have anything like this where I grew up. Even in my small town, growing up, we had 2 dairies right in town, and that was like in the city limits, but we didn't have a creamery. And so I was, at the time I was a caterer. I'm the culinary side of the co-founder. And we were making ice creams for clients, and we'd have like dinner parties and things like that. And I'd always personally made ice cream. So I just was fascinated. And as Chad was coming to Texas and then kind of discovering the flavors that I grew up with and realizing that there wasn't any local ice cream that was, made with local milk, from ingredients from family farms, family-run dairy, that didn't exist. We just were like, this is insane. We talked about it for it was 2005. So we talked about it for about 5 years. And then on one trip back to Austin, we knew we were going to move back to Austin.
Anthony did.
Yeah, I told Chad that on our first official date, like at the end of the date.
It's good to be clear to know where you want to go, right? Like that's
there was no surprises.
I told him the date was going well. I said, full disclosure, I will be moving back to Austin in 4 years.
Wow.
And it was 4 years and 2 months.
Wow.
It was 5 years.
Nice.
I don't know how many Texans you know, but Texans are very, very proud of their state.
Of their Texas.
Oh, yes.
So it was just kind of, we talked about it for so long, and we were like, someone should be doing this, someone should be doing this. There are family dairies here. My grandparents on my dad's side were farmers, so that was something that was very important to me and just like very close to my heart, was that we can build this business and we can make ice cream how Chad grew up eating it and how I grew up making it, and really support this entire community. And at the same time, make like the cleanest, most honest ice cream out there. And so that was 2010. We made that decision, and then sold our house, took that money, opened our business, and then I guess the rest is
ice cream history.
It was that easy. It was just that easy.
Oh, yes, right. Like starting a business is that easy. No, it's a lot of perseverance, tenacity, grit, and also for you all just to come up with that idea, to see that opportunity. Chad being from Lancaster, where creameries are, it seems like they're a part of the culture, just to kind of say, introducing Anthony to that. And then Anthony, like you identifying like, whoa, this doesn't necessarily exist in Texas yet. If it did, there would be this groundswell of support, or at least people with savvy palates would be very satisfied with what you're delivering. For folks that may live in places, more rural communities in Texas. I grew up in Central Florida, and I could tell you when growing up there weren't any local creameries. So talk to us a little bit about what distinguishes the kind of ice cream that you're making from what many folks without creameries in their towns would rely on, maybe Breyers or, I don't know, any kind of like supermarket bought ice creams. What's the difference and what sets you apart?
So the biggest difference would be that if you go to a chain ice cream shop, that they're most likely, the vast majority of them are just buying, if they're making their own ice cream, they're buying a pre-made ice cream base, which is, again, the vast majority of those ice cream bases are made with milk that comes from large dairy operations. And they're buying milk from the dairy co-op. And so you don't really have any control over where the milk is coming from, how humanely the cows are treated, exactly what they're fed, any of those things. It's pretty much completely out of your control. What they do is they buy a base mix, and then from there you can make, your own flavor. So you can add in any of your inclusions, sauces, any kind of flavoring you want. But in essence, it's the same ice cream that almost everyone else has, because most of the ice cream bases, even from different brands, are pretty much made the same way. There's a lot of different versions of them, but at their core, they're essentially made up of the same ingredients. So what we do is different, is instead of saying like, oh, we want to have an ice cream shop and then let's just buy a base mix, we went and researched and traveled all across the state to find a family-owned dairy that was totally transparent, like that we knew how the cows were being treated, what they were being fed.
We could see them,
touch them. It's hard to close enough to your cow to touch. But yeah, we could kind of confirm that everything was being done exactly the way that we were comfortable with. And those are the kind of people we want to work with. We've kind of built the whole company around that model, and that's kind of in that motto is that we really have let the farmers and the food artisans that we work with sort of dictate what our flavors are, in a way. We can get to that later, but that's essentially what makes us different, is that even small chains, they buy a base mix, an ice cream base, from a large producer. And so a lot of times they put things in there to make it more shelf stable, and they're not necessarily things that Chad and I want to be eating, and that was important to us. And they're also not necessarily things that are great for the planet. I don't know how deep you want me to go, into all of that.
This is, it's actually super helpful, and sorry to kind of cut in here, but it sounds like, and I don't know, are you all a B certified corporation, or have you thought about?
That's great.
Yeah.
We're doing the application right now. Not right now during this interview. But
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah.
On the computer.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I just asked that question is it very much sounds like, the ethos of your business practices are this aspect of social responsibility, of like environmental impact, the fact that you're considering the humane treatment of cows, right? Like where the actual dairy is coming from and making sure they're okay. The quality of the dairy itself is at a different standard than this kind of base mix that I guess a lot of the chains use. And, and I imagine, especially for maybe younger folks or just more conscious consumers, your brand is appealing, right? I'm excited by it. I don't even eat ice cream, but it sounds like, wow, this is like maybe at least what's going into your body versus some of the kind of chemical alternatives, or at least dairy that has a lot of hormones in it, I guess. I mean, this is out of my league, so I'm learning a lot from you all right now, and I appreciate that.
No, you're right. It's very interesting because you can, even base mixes, there's certain ones that say all the cows are grass fed, but then if you press a little bit deeper, you can just ask them, like, so do you ever have to supplement from a co-op? And I've yet to find one that doesn't say yes from time to time we have to supplement for a co-op to keep up with the demand for production. And so when you're talking about a co-op, it's just like it's so hard to sort of confirm the treatment of all of these cows because you're pulling from so many different dairies. That in itself makes us very different. We're a single source dairy. We know exactly where all of our milk and cream comes from, which is very rare.
Yeah, and I imagine for the local dairy farmers too, the relationships that you're building, that's a boost for their businesses too, right? So it's kind of rising tide lifting all boats here, which is really special, I think.
We feel that way about all of the dairy for sure, but every single fruit, vegetable, everything is local that we put into is grown locally that we put into our ice cream. The exceptions are like vanilla. And for our coconut milk bases, unfortunately, we can't get vanilla or coconut in Texas.
Yeah.
But everything else, we rely on those farmers and artisans, and we feel the same way. Like we want to grow because we feel like we're able to then grow along with them. And it's a really beautiful thing to kind of see happen and watch. Bob and Robin, who make all of our chocolate for us, they have a chocolate company, Seriously Chocolate, here in Austin. And it's amazing to see us kind of all growing together. And yeah, it's just a really good thing.
Yeah, being a small business owner is a very isolating kind of
dark turn.
No, it's not dark. I mean, the reality of it is it's a little isolating because you're running a small business and it takes all of you, and especially when you're running it doing it as a couple. I mean, it's never not there. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You clock out, you go home and have a normal life. It's constantly with you. So being able to share that and with these other very similar individuals and couples, I mean, it helps you survive basically, and it helps you kind of thrive, and it's exciting and it feels good, which is good to have.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can imagine a lot of our listeners right now nodding their heads because many folks who tune into the show are small business owners themselves and totally get that. And what you had just mentioned, this experience of being somewhat isolated, you have this vision when you're getting started. You try to describe it to other people and they're kind of like scratching their head of like, huh, there's Ben and Jerry's or, whatever, and you're like, no, but this is what makes it different, right? So talk to us a little bit about those early, so you all met in 2005. So talking about like just the relationship itself. And then 6 years later, you find this business, you start it up together. And so I'm curious, like, what each of your origin stories are. So I think, Anthony, you were mentioning you have a background, and you're the culinary expert, as you described yourself, So what was the genesis of getting started, and how did the blend of your skills really allow your business to thrive as you continue to grow and expand?
Yeah, so Anthony does have the culinary background, and it's interesting because at the beginning of the story was kind of, I'm a little older than Anthony, a couple months.
Oh my God.
So I was a little further along in my career when we met, and I was enjoying my career, which is, I was doing retail interior design, which I had been doing for many, many years for some pretty major retailers. So when we met, and he was talking about moving back to Austin in 5 years, and as we were getting closer to that 5-year mark, because he was very insistent, like 5 years, and I mean, there was basically a stopwatch going. I started to get a little concerned because I was working for major retailers, and there just weren't any in Austin. And I was like, so I'm not quite sure. I'm like, I love the idea. I love a change. I'm very excited, but I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do as we started talking about this idea of starting our own business. And as time evolved, we realized that that combining our interests and our experience and our passions, combining all of that was actually kind of what started the realization of this entire company. Anthony's culinary side was producing the product. My retail design, branding experience was kind of establishing the brands, the shop environments. They all just kind of came together. And I think that's really the beauty of it. And I feel like that is so important in our story and probably a lot of other stories of couples who want to start a business together. It takes all of you to do this. So if you're able to take all of you and your experience and actually apply it to the business rather than just completely derailing and doing something you've never done, that sounds terrifying to me. We'd never made ice cream and had an ice cream shop, but I've designed many shops. I've worked with many brands, lots of operational background. Anthony has baked and cooked his entire life, and it almost made it easier and a lot less terrifying. Not to say it was easy making that transition, because it wasn't, but it really did help get the idea and the concept off the ground, and it still propels us. We still maintain, we do a lot of everything now, especially 8 years into this business, but those are still our passions. Those are still the things that we consider ourselves. That's our greatest contribution to this company, or what we've always known and are good at and enjoy doing.
We gravitate back to those, what our passion is, which happened to be, we were lucky that our passions were our professions before we opened Lick. And so, and I will say that this may not be related to the question, but that I feel like the times we struggle the most is when we try to go into to each other's territory.
Mm-hmm.
Crossing the line.
Yeah, I think that as long as we kind of stick to what our passion is, and kind of stay in those lanes, things run much more smoothly. And we're able to do that as we've grown. We're able to do that way more than in the beginning. Because in the beginning, obviously, you're doing everything.
Yes.
And so now it's way easier for us to stay in our lanes and divide and conquer in that way. And it's better. I mean, we're able to do it because we have this team now, but it also is so much better for the team when they know which one of us to come to.
Right.
So,
starting a business, you all had alluded, super easy. Just kidding. No, it's really challenging and it's hard and it takes a while to get that momentum going. And it sounds like you all did a really good job, even though at times you did kind of step over into each other's lanes, but recognizing like your unique skills and the blend that makes it's kind of like that rocket fuel for your business in particular. So, and it sounds like the skills that you honed were largely when you were working for someone else. And a question that I have for you is, what does it feel like to blend these skills, but to do it for yourself, to do it for your business? Like, what's that feeling? Because we talk about the challenges of starting a business, and certainly I don't want people thinking about starting a business right now to be dissuaded. I mean, it is a lot of hard work, but like there's also that reward. So talk to us a little bit about those rewards.
That's a really great question, and we haven't been asked that many times. It's extremely gratifying. I mean, I think what prompted us to do this was, I loved what I was doing. But being a creative in a corporate environment is a little constraining at times, a little restrictive. So I loved the idea of being able to do what I love to do, but doing it for myself. And quite honestly, my stepfather had his own business, his own family business, and Anthony's family had their own businesses at some point. So we kind of had that. We were exposed to entrepreneurs in our lives and saw the work that went into it. So we kind of understood what we were getting into. But I think it's strange because what I'm realizing, the further along we go, how much you have to depend on others. You enter this world thinking like, I'm going to be my own boss and there's just going to be so much more freedom. You realize pretty quickly that that's not the case. You are your own boss and you do have freedom, but you are so dependent on others in every realm, from lawyers and real estate agents to suppliers and vendors and customers. I mean, like on paper, you're your own boss, but I mean, you're really, everyone else is your boss. Yeah. I mean, honestly, and I had only worked for small businesses before we opened. So Chad had, I think, a different, more rose-colored glasses on about being your own boss. And I helped
open a bakery and just saw what that was like and learned a lot from that. So
Yeah.
It's such high highs and such low lows.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the range of emotion is so much greater.
Yes.
But I think I think that you get so much out of it. I mean, this came up this morning in a meeting that I had, and that when you start your own business and when you work, just even working within a small business that's successful or that's growing, it's such an amazing thing because you do get to learn so much. You're like every single day. I mean, and that's like, I've never worked in a corporate setting, but I would imagine Chad would have to speak to this, but I just like every single day there are challenges for sure, but it's like no one day is like the day before, like ever.
Even 8 years later, every day is a new day.
And you're either wired to thrive in that or you're not. And I guess Chad and I we thrive somewhat in that sort of situation.
Because the highs are great. I mean, it's the most gratifying. It's such a sense of gratification that I had never received in my career. It's like, I did a great job. My boss thinks I did a great job. But when you accomplish it yourself and with the team that, you've basically built and are all have the same exact mission, such a sense of gratification. Yeah, it really is great. The lows suck because they're your lows. Like,
right.
The low is then all your low.
Yeah.
Also.
You got all the lows.
Yeah.
It's all you when you own the company completely. I mean, it's just the reverse. You feel when it's a low, you're like, oh my God, I've let everyone down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, you just go. It's so easy to then take on all of that emotion and all of those feelings.
Yeah. And the further along you go, and the more team, the larger the team you have, and the larger customer base you have, and the supplier network, and just all of those people that are truly a part of your business, it's like you have such a greater responsibility to succeed. So that it adds a lot of pressure. It adds a lot of satisfaction, but it's not for the faint of heart. It really isn't.
No. Hi, Outbosses. Rhodes Perry here. As you all know, part of my passion for this podcast is to empower you and fellow LGBTQ entrepreneurs to cultivate a feeling of purpose and belonging in your business, to know you can show up and be the most authentic version of yourself. Purpose, belonging, and workplace culture are concepts I take seriously in my own consulting practice. I'm dedicated to growing the belonging movement to empower leaders just like you, from the largest organizations to the smallest, to build healthier workplaces. That's why I'm thrilled to share everyday practices you can take to build more inclusive workplaces in my best-selling book, Belonging at Work. The book features some of today's leading diversity, equity, and inclusion thought leaders who share some of their wisdom, skills, and stories to give you the confidence necessary to stitch a sense of belonging into the fabric of your organization. To get your own copy of the book, visit rhodesonamazon.com. There you can find a paperback, Kindle, Audible, and hard copy version of the book. Again, that's rhodesonamazon.com. Together, let's grow the belonging movement. I really like what you're talking about here about this contrast, right? The contrast between these like massive successes, right? Like, I mean, you started your creamery in Austin, you now opened another in San Antonio, you're distributing nationally, right? Like that's huge. And that started from 2011 and, it's almost a decade later and you're growing, you're expanding. And I can imagine in that process too, there was a lot of learning lessons when you hit those lows and you're like, but without that contrast, it's hard to recognize when you have those breakthrough moments. And I'm curious, like, we talk about this, we've had a couple of office hours where we dive in a little bit deeper on this idea of kind of the entrepreneurial, like the idea of goal setting where, we set these lofty goals for ourselves, we achieve it. And a lot of times, many of us just kind of plow through to the next goal without just stopping and reflecting and looking back to be like, oh my God, we did that, So I'm curious for you all, do you have something in place of reminding yourself to kind of pause, do that reflection and celebrate those highs, celebrate those successes? And if you do, what does that look like?
I am definitely one of those people that will run past a goal or plow through a goal, and then just immediately I'm on to the next one. Mm-hmm. Like what is the next goal in front of us?
Yep.
And not until recently, I'm going to say this year, like I finally started just recognizing that we have to celebrate all of those accomplishments. And I think, I don't know if that's just because we're the co-founders and it's just like, I want this business to be as successful and solid and stable as possible. And so all of our goals are just kind of like always to that end. Like we're always trying to make that happen. And so I think what it is though, is that I realize that it's, even if I don't need it, which I do need it, I think I tell myself that I don't, but I do. The team for sure needs it. And besides needing it, they deserve it.
Yeah.
And so Chad's way better. I mean, I think we're really good at thank yous and just like the way we approach everyone. But as far as company-wide celebrating when things happening and recognizing that accomplishment, personally, I feel like we've just kind of started doing that. Chad's way better at it. You're way better acknowledging those sort of achieving those goals.
It's interesting, right? And it makes me wonder, so Anthony, you started a bakery. You've been kind of more on this kind of entrepreneurial track a little bit longer. And for Chad, I'm wondering, like, is that something that you have picked up from kind of working for these major retailers where that was kind of baked into the culture that you're bringing into your small business now? Or what do you think, is there a reason why that there's this difference, or have you thought about that?
I think so. I mean, when you work in the design field, and I worked for several architecture firms where the projects we worked on literally took years. I mean, you work on the same project for years. So when that project is finally, when they open the doors to that convention center, that shopping center, like, okay, now's the time to celebrate. Like we've been, consumed with one project for years. And what we do now is so, we're small, we're agile, and we truly do get so much accomplished in a day. I mean, in one day, you could have 3 reasons to celebrate getting something done. Yeah. And I think that over the course of time, like Anthony said, you just kind of forget to just take a minute and celebrate. Like, yay, these are, they're smaller victories, but they're still victories that need to be celebrated. Totally. So it's really just tuning yourself to realize that. And I think it has been easier for me because I come from that. Granted, it wasn't daily or weekly. It was a lot longer. But also just from the shopkeeping side and being a little bit closer to the larger, the shop teams themselves. And I just, in my kind of chunk of duties, that's more my responsibility. Mm-hmm. So I have that interaction more with, the people who are at the front lines. Right. So it's just kind of more natural and easier to just go to the shop and say, hey, you're doing a great job today. And it's just different. Totally. We use that a lot. I think that we're doing it more and more. Well, we've up here at the office in the kitchen. It's hard. The kitchen is sometimes so disconnected from the shops, which is unfortunate because I mean they're the foundation of the entire company. I mean they're making all the ice cream, and so we started. And again, it's one of those things that it's like, oh my God, we had our it's like we've had our best November ever, and we can tell the kitchen that and say thank you, but it's hard. I mean, we try to do little things even when there's seemingly not really anything major to celebrate. We love doing like a Taco Tuesday. We love our tacos in Texas. Oh, yeah. And so we do barbecue Wednesday. Yeah, we do lots of barbecue also. Very stereotypical. We eat a lot. But I think that's the way we kind of show that is like just on a Tuesday. It's like, okay, next week guys, like Tuesday we want to buy lunch for everybody, and like let's just acknowledge that everyone's doing a really great job. Yeah. And for no real reason. It's just kind of like there's, like Chad said, there's so many things accomplishments to celebrate within a week really, that it's like just kind of for seemingly no reason celebrating just the fact that they're crushing it. Yeah. Is kind of I think how we approach that. Yeah. This question, I mean, I think it's super important. I know it's a struggle for me in my own business just to kind of hit that pause button and do that reflection and building in, what does celebration look like? And, it sounds like you're thinking through that and you have a team, right? And you really want to make sure that folks are showing up and being recognized for their contributions. And I think that's so important that you're kind of playing around with what that looks like. And for folks tuning in too, I definitely encourage, reflecting on this question as well. How are you celebrating your successes? Because this work is hard when you're doing your own thing and the stakes are high and you have high expectations for yourself and what you want to accomplish professionally in your business. So I thank you all for sharing feedback on that. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about
what brings you to the Rainbow family. This is the Out Entrepreneur. And just if you could briefly, reflect on a time when maybe not so much in your business now, but when, reflecting back of working for other people, contrasting, right? Like you're able to show up as your authentic selves. You're on the Out Entrepreneur. This is great. We're sharing your message with the world. But has there ever been a time for you professionally where it felt like you had to kind of cover aspects of your sexual orientation, just feeling like you couldn't, authentically talk about your partner or, being a part of the LGBT community that you think could be helpful for audience member or audience listeners who are just kind of struggling with how out can I be when I start my business? Any kind of specific examples you can think of that was a hard time, but you were able to work around it that you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, I think we might have different. But Chad, you go first.
Yeah, so it's a really good question as well because, growing up, I worked from the moment I was legally able to work. I was working in retail. I was working in environments that were just, you could be open, you could be whoever you wanted. It didn't matter. Mm-hmm. So I pretty much started my career in that sort of environment. And I just worked my way up through design. Everything that I was doing and everywhere I was working was just already, you could be whoever you wanted. You could be gay, you could be open, you could, whatever. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
So I really never had to worry about it too much, quite honestly. I didn't really come out officially until I was like in my early 30s, even though it wasn't a secret, but I didn't really have those conversations till I met Anthony and was 30.
Yeah.
With your family.
With my family,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I consider my true coming out. But the strange part is that I hadn't really had to think about it until I opened my own business. And you are concerned with everybody you interact with. And coming to Texas, where I was unfamiliar with the people of Texas,
except for one,
I started putting up my guard up, and I just started thinking about my sexuality differently. Anthony and I entered this business as a couple, so it was already like, there's really not, once you meet us both, you can't hide it. Like, you can't hide the fact that we're a gay couple.
Yeah.
So I was finding myself to be very guarded and just very almost paranoid about what people were thinking. And you're trying to build a business, and you're just networking, and you're just out there. And it ends up at the end of the day, for as new to me as that was, you really learn to not have any kind of preset. People surprise. Let me just say that people surprise me. We work a lot with farmers, a lot of just small town, hardworking, salt of the earth people. And I grew up with that. But when you're building a business, it's like, wow, I'm going to rely on these people. I need to know these people, and they need to respect me, and they need to help me. I can't grow without them.
Right. So
I've learned I quickly realized that people do surprise you, and the people you think are going to be not open to you or not welcoming of you or just accepting of you, more often than not, that's not the case. So I think that just don't go into a situation assuming the worst. Go in assuming the best. Be yourself. I think if you're kind and you're a truly genuine individual, you're going to get respect. And the people that don't respect that, you pretty much get that immediately. And we've learned that those are not people we want to work with.
It's a really good filter.
Yeah.
Actually, it's like a very good, that maybe, I don't know, like straight couples who own a business maybe don't get. But for us, I think of it as it has become a really, really good filter for us, because we can go into a meeting with a landlord touring a location or something like that. And it has not happened a lot, but it's happened a couple of times where someone will, when they finally put together that we're a couple, you can see like their facial expression changes a little bit.
Yeah.
And so does the demeanor.
Yeah.
So does the conversation.
And the demeanor and the conversation.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, this is not going to be, I don't want you as my landlord.
Right.
So no matter how much I possibly like the space, like most likely you're not going to, like, it's not going to work out. They'll come up with some reason or another that it won't. And at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to give my business to that person or work with that person. So it has become a really good filter in that way. My experience is very similar to Chad's. I've been out since college. And so every job that I've had, I've been out in. And I think that New York helped. Like my first legit job outside of college was in New York, and it was a gay-owned business. So it was just kind of like a very easy transition for me in that respect into the official workforce because it was just easy and sound kind of like it just sounds too easy, but it actually was. And then from then it was like I just there was no going back in. I mean, once we were a couple, I was like, I'm not gonna go back into the closet anywhere I work going forward. But yeah, Chad's right. I mean, like we get asked this question a lot because we do work with so many farmers and also because we're in Texas, and I think people have like a preconceived notion maybe about Texas, like everywhere outside of Austin. Mm-hmm. But it hasn't happened a lot. But when it does, it's just like, okay,
it's almost jarring.
It is almost jarring when it happens. Then you're like, oh my God, that really?
Like, did we really just like they don't want us there because we're gay? Like what?
Yeah.
Because we honestly, we're fortunate to not, especially in Austin, not have to really think about it that much. We don't, it's a very open community city, and most of the people who come here are the same. Whether they're just visiting or whatever. It's just you're surrounded by open people.
And we did think it was important to always be completely. I mean, it's honest ice creams, like honest ice creams.
Yeah.
The honest
it's in the
part
name.
we take very seriously.
Yeah.
And being from a small town, I think that ice cream is such a good. It kind of brings in every kind of person. Pretty much everybody likes it. It's such a good sort of
uniter.
Yeah, I can't think of a better word. Sorry. And we just have never held back. And I think that that's we've talked to other gay business owners about this. And I feel like we don't ever shy away from doing an event in a small town or doing, like one of these communities right outside of Austin. And we've had feedback from other people who are in the LGBT community who are like, really? And like, were you comfortable? And I'm like, if they asked us to be there for a festival or something like that, I think of myself as being the kid in that small town. And I think it's so important. I don't think that we need to shy away from being in the communities that there's a preconceived notion that they won't be accepting. I think that that's exactly what needs to happen so that everyone's around every kind of person. And so I think that's how you slowly start to change this. I mean, I grew up in a very small town, but I remember vividly, we had 3 same-sex couples in my town of like 3,000 people in rural Texas. And
6 people.
But by them being there, it was an outlet for me to be like, this is a reality that I can have.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really important.
Yeah, they've not been banished.
No.
Oh yeah. Just to jump in, just the visibility, the fact that you all are showing up. And Anthony, I think you were saying this about kind of going back or going from New York, being in retail, right? Am I getting this right? I think so. Sorry if I'm mixing it up between your stories, but yeah. But just kind of to go back, and to be a little bit more on guard going to Texas. And then I think you were saying, how people surprise you, right? And the surprise, the interdependence that you have on local farmers. I mean, you're changing people's minds, you're changing people's hearts because they have real relationships with you. And I think that's really powerful. And I think it leads nicely into this next question, and we're kind of running out of time, but I do want to ask you this, if you can kind of be succinct in your response of recognizing, there's certainly challenges, even, we're entering a new decade, we're about to be in 2020, and still in the workplace, we don't have protections across the board in this country for LGBT people in the workplace. So what do you see as like lived experience of being a part of the Rainbow family that is a superpower that allows you to stand out in your business? And I think you kind of were jumping into that towards the end of the response to this last question, but I think you all have a really good perspective, and I think this could be helpful for other folks really struggling with, that feeling of being on guard. They might be in an area where people may presume not to be the most LGBT friendly, and any kind of advice you can give on the superpowers of being a part of the Rainbow family, I think could inspire folks.
Well, I'll try to be succint.
Sorry, I know we just ate up a lot of time. Sorry.
No, this is good. This is good. This is good.
They're great questions, and they're complicated.
Yes.
They're complicated matters, but for me, I think it's just, I'm learning that in this world we live in, it's very easy to, we're exposed to people that we may not necessarily think are really great people. I've always tried to be my genuine, true self, and, I'm caring. I intend for the best. I just want the best. I have very positive intentions, and I meet people with an open heart. I want to know about them. And I think as a business owner, as a gay business owner, that's just really holds. You have to do that. I think and I think it is kind of a superpower to just, one, meet people that may have never met an LGBTQ person, and I think just being authentic and being kind and being warm and open and listening to them and really getting to know these people, you just mutually connect. And I think it's those connections that I really am finding just very wonderful as I get older and as we get further along in this process. It's just those human connections are so important, especially now in this world. It's just, I think everyone has that power to do, and I hope everyone does that. But I think especially in our community where it's like, there are preconceived notions of LGBTQ people. I think it's kind of silly. It's definitely silly. I don't think it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But you have to also put yourself out there and get to know people, and that's where those connections form.
I think it's the visibility component. I think that we've talked about this with other business owners, and I think that it's just showing up and being visible and making that real connection with people. And I think that you said it earlier about the farmers, is that we may be the first ever out, person that they've ever met, but when we start talking about ice cream, if there is an uncomfort level, which maybe has happened a couple times, we start talking about me growing up in the country or Chad growing up in the country, and they own a farm, and we start talking about the ice cream and
talk about tractors,
right? And
yeah,
and those sort of things, and they immediately forget the other part, and then it's like before you know it, you've been working together 4 years and like sending each other Christmas cards, and like it's just like it kind of. I think that is maybe the greatest superpower that would come from it, and I think that honestly, it's just people who are nervous about opening a business and being out as a business owner. It's just that with like any other part of your life, it's like if you don't live your full truth, you're going to shortchange yourself. You're not going to be as great of a business owner as you could be because you're going to be holding back from who you truly are. And you're going to end up shortchanging everyone around you and everyone who joins you on the journey of growing your business. And so I know it's easier said than done, but I really think that that's the truth. I just don't think you'd be a better business owner by being an out business owner.
I think you have to. You have to be yourself.
Yeah, and I think it lives up to your name, right? Honest is in your business name, and I really like what you both are sharing about this kind of authenticity and the visibility and the fact that you all grew up in more rural areas. You're able to speak a similar language, to folks that you're doing business with, where you're putting other folks at ease because you're comfortable with yourselves. And that is a process. That is a lifelong process, whether you're LGBT or not. It's just figuring out who you are in the world and being bold enough to try to show up consistently. And that's not always easy. It's not always safe, right? But when you can and the stars align, you are giving that possibility to other folks. And I thank you for doing that. And I'm sure, like what you were talking about, Anthony, for younger people in your town, of just being a kid and seeing out folks in a pretty small area, that gave you hope, that gave you possibility, and you're doing that, you're paying that forward, and I think that that's huge. I have so many other questions for y'all, and sadly we're up against the hour, so I wanted to ask you this last question, which is just the fact that for those of us lucky enough to be in the United States, you do distribute your ice cream, and so where do we learn about that? Where can we find more? Where can folks? I'm fortunate enough now to live in Portland, Oregon, so we've got some good ice cream here, but I want to compare it to what you all are offering. So Salt and Straw, watch out, because you may have a fierce competitor soon. So how do we find your ice cream? Where do we find you?
It's a great question. You just go to ilikelick.com. That's our website.
I like it.
And you can order through Goldbelly. So there should be an icon right there on the homepage.
Cool.
And you'll be set. Just a few clicks away from the cleanest, most honest ice cream you'll ever have.
I love it. Well, everyone check it out. We'll include that in the show notes. And I think you all had a few promotions there. So for people who want to check that out, go to outentrepreneur.com, or you could text OUTBOSS, all one word, to 444-999, and we will connect you with that info. This was great. Thank you all for spending so much time with me and for sharing a little bit more about yourselves and your business. I believe in what you're doing. I think it's such good business ethos and how you're doing business. I think it's a good model for other folks. And I wish you luck in that certification for the B Corp. I know it's a lot of paperwork, but it's totally worth it. So thank you. And thanks for inspiring our audience. And yeah. And for everyone who's tuned in, thank you again for another week of The Out Entrepreneur. I'm super excited for this new year, this new decade, and everything that we've got planned coming up over the next 12 months. And if you haven't yet, please like, rate, and review the show on Apple iTunes or wherever you consume your podcasts. And as always, keep being your authentic selves as much as possible, as consistent as possible throughout the next year. And I'll talk with you next week.